Welcome to part 2 of 27 behaviors that damage relationships, or the 27 destructive interactions. In part 1 I explained what destructive interactions are, how they are corrosive and how they impact directly on a conversation, the actual conversation taking place in a moment, as well as on the relationship over time, as well as a little bit about the origin of destructive behaviors, how they emerge across time as actual initial benign attempts to try and control and change and manage the intensity of the relationship. In part 2 I'm going to focus on a specific set of destructive behaviors. These are all what I call approach behaviors. They have something in common, which is that they proactively engage and pull the other person into the conversation and engage the person in the content. This doesn't mean they are positive. All destructive interactions are corrosive, but they're very different from the destructive interactions that I will cover in part 3, which are more to do with behaviors trying to reduce the intensity of the conversation. Okay, so let's start. Number 1, generalization. Probably one of the most common destructive interactions that you find in relationships. And what they have in common is it's about making sweeping or absolute statements that really exaggerate behavior patterns. For example, saying you always interrupt me, you never listen to me, you're always doing this or that, as opposed to never. They're just rough general statements that are sort of interspersed within the conversation. And just a reminder from what we discussed in part 1, what these do is they interrupt the flow, they derail the conversation, and they cause a divergence in terms of what each person is focusing on. And all the destructive interactions will do that. Number 2, referencing the past. Also probably one of the most common destructive interactions. This is where we have a particular conversation, maybe an argument or a disagreement, and what either one or both partners will do is to pull in content from the past. Now the content is irrelevant, but it will be brought in as an evidence or an example of another occurrence of the same thing. So what happens is, rather than focusing on the actual conversation, the actual topic in terms of the specifics of what happened yesterday, for example, we're now talking about all the other times when this type of event or conversation or argument happened, and that derails the conversation. Number 3, criticism and fault finding. Criticism and fault finding has something in its essence. It conveys a message, whether or not it is said in that way, which is you are not good enough. This is what the person hears who receives all this focus on their shortcomings. It really focuses on everything that is broken, that is not good enough, that is somehow not meeting up to some standard. And what that means is, across a conversation, the conversation is always sort of focused on deficit and what is not there, and what is not enough, or what is too much. And what gets lost, and what is usually not present, are a focus on the positives, or a focus on affirmations of the things that actually work. So criticism and fault finding, and it usually becomes a way of engaging where all I hear from my partner is everything I don't do right. So the experience is very often, I never get it right, and that's all I ever hear. I only hear about things I don't get right. Number 4 is character descriptions. Character descriptions is something we actually do in many different contexts, but it's the way it is done, and it's the content of the character description. This is where I am making a statement or labeling a person's personality or character. For example, saying to someone, well, you're not very good at this, or they're saying to someone, you're very lazy, or you're not very caring, or you're not very emotionally literate. All of these are actually globalizations. It's sort of generalizing the person and their character, and it may seem not as bad, but the essence of it is, I assume something that I call a definitional privilege. I assume that I have the right to actually tell you what you are like, your character and personality. Number 5 is a sort of a variation of this in a very particular way, mind reading. Mind reading is not just telling the person what they are like, it's very specifically telling the person what they are thinking and feeling. So I'm telling you what you're thinking or feeling. I know you are disgusted with me. I know you don't care about me. I know you are thinking this or that. It's basically assuming that I know what's going on in each other's head. Now, if you describe it like that, it's clearly obvious why this will never work. One person is assuming they know what another person is thinking and feeling, and it is actually remarkably common in relationships where people start to believe they actually know what the other person thinks or feel. And it doesn't mean that we don't really get to know the person and can anticipate it, but it's the act of communicating this, of saying to the person, this is what you're thinking, this is what you're feeling. And this is what I discussed in part 1, where there's no other response to this except to become defensive. Number 6, assigning intent. This is a specific variation of mind reading, where mind reading focuses on telling the other person, this is what you're thinking, this is what you're feeling, I know. I'm now telling the person actually what their intentions are. I'm telling them why they are doing something. I'm describing their motivations. Now again, can you see it's in all of these things? I make an assumption that I know, and that I have the right to actually impose that on the conversation and on the relationship. So assigning intent is saying, for example, I know you were trying to hurt me when you said that. You think I'm stupid, and that's why you made that face, or you did that, had that expression, or anything like this. It's where I tell the person, I know what you're doing, and I can see what you're doing, and you are trying to do this. It is not a question, there's no curiosity, it is a statement of fact about the intentions of another person. Number 7, blaming and scapegoating. They sort of go hand in hand. Blaming is where one person is always to blame for what has happened. For example, I'm upset because you said that. We are in this state because of this, that, or the other thing, or just generally blaming a person. So you can see there are specific variations, or as well as a general pattern of blaming the other person. And the core of it is really important. The core of it is saying, you are the one doing things to me and to us. I'm not an active participant. This is stuff happening to me and to us. You are the one. So it's really pushing all the responsibility and ownership to the other person, and basically absolving the self of playing a part. Now we know for a fact that in a relationship, it's always a combination of the actions and inactions of both people. What blaming does is it puts all of that ownership on the other person. And the extreme variation of this is where I'm actually blaming the other person for my behavior and my feelings. So not only are you the cause of what I feel, if I did something maybe exaggerated, or if I shouted or slammed the door, that is also your fault. So even my own behavior is linked to yours as a response, and as a reasonable response. Again, pushing all the responsibility back to the other person. Now scapegoating emerges over time. A relationship where one person is consistently in different ways, in different conversations, described as the one that is the cause, the perpetrator, the narcissist, the aggressor, the one doing things to the other person and to the relationship. Number 8, self-victimization and one-downmanship. They go together. Self-victimization is where I not only focus on you, blaming and scapegoating, I actually position myself in a one-down position. So the moment I put myself in a one-down position, I put you in a one-up position. But it's a very powerful interpersonal strategy, because what I do is I position myself as the victim, as the vulnerable one, as the injured one, as the one that is in this place also because of you. But it's a very much a focus on the position of being the victim, the position of vulnerability. And it's not a true vulnerability. It's a pseudo vulnerability. There's a falseness in it. Doesn't mean that's the intention, but that's what it is. It's someone who's always talking about themselves as if they are a victim, with this sense of not being an adult, not being able to say no, not being able to advocate for themselves. It's important to understand that these are not generalized statements that I'm making. I'm talking about a relationship, a couple relationship, where I assume it's consensual, where I assume that both people are adults. Number 9, ridiculing and mocking. Ridiculing is about making fun of someone else, making fun of their feelings. There's nothing playful about this. This is not about humor and people playing with each other, which a lot of couples can do. This is about making fun of someone. Usually they do not like that, and usually at their expense. It's not something that is truly playful. And it's important to say that, because very often couples will say, well, but I was playing. It's like, well, if you look at the expression at the time of saying it, there's nothing playful in it. So ridiculing and then mocking. Mocking is basically going one step further. I'm not only making fun of you and ridiculing you and your behavior and how you are, I'm actually mimicking you. So pretending to speak like you, pretending to be you in a way that's often quite exaggerated and quite unpleasant. Number 10 is insults. Probably doesn't need a lot of explanation. This is really about using harsh, derogatory, hurtful language in a way of what you're saying to a person. You're an idiot, you're stupid, you're lazy. These things are destructive just in itself. A particular variation of insults is when it gets probably even more corrosive, is when it becomes actual name calling. These are not just, I'm not just describing you in a way that's quite hurtful. I'm actually sort of really labeling you with something quite derogatory, like you're a loser, you're a child, you're a bitch, you're a narcissist. In part 1, I explained how every single one of these things is corrosive, and when it happens within a conversation, the conversation gets derailed, because one person is now busy being activated and responding to the emotional impact of this corrosive or event that is happening for them, even though the other person may not even be realizing what they just did. Number 12, controlling. We're now moving into behaviors that are very clearly about controlling the behavior and how the other person turns up in the relationship in different forms. So broadly speaking, controlling is really trying to control the way the other person is, how they are in a relationship, how they are in the conversation, what they do, who they see, who they spend time with, all of this. And this controlling can take place in many different forms, which is impossible to cover here. Now, there's a particular variation on controlling that I often see in couple therapy, where one person is trying to control the narrative. So there's controlling of the person, of the behavior in different ways, and then there's the controlling of the narrative. Controlling of the narrative is about trying to assert control of what things mean, what is going on, how we are talking about ourselves, how we remember things. So it's very much taking place in how things are described within the relationship, and usually it is one person that is much more verbal, much more articulate, able to create this story. And it's never a positive, affirming story. It's not a consensual story. It's not something that is sort of validating both individuals. So you can see how controlling the narrative and a lot of these destructive interactions can run parallel, or at the same time sort of be part of a lot of other destructive interactions. Number 13 is conditionality. Conditionality is basically making acceptance or affection dependent on behavior or behavioral changes on the other person. Unless you apologize, I will not do this, or unless you apologize, I will do that. If this, then that. And it's always about the other person being the one responsible for making a change, and whatever you do in the relationship being conditional on the other person. So you can see, like other destructive interactions in this group, it's all about focusing and pushing the ownership and responsibility and accountability to the other person. Number 14 is threats. Threats are quite a wide topic, and it's really about using ultimatums or intimidation to control. It's always here about control. And I can use threats in many different ways. If you do this, I will do that. It's really a threat about something I will do, usually in the future. And this can take many, many different forms, and it's not going to be possible to exhaust all the possibilities. One very obvious way in which I see threats is when people start threatening to leave the relationship. This is different from a constructive or conversation about raising concerns about a relationship. Is when threats are used increasingly, especially if you know it's something that's very triggering to the other person. The threat of leaving or divorce or all of these things have a massive impact on another person and need to be separated from the real sharing of one's own position within the relationship. Threats can become very nasty and very unpleasant. Threats about what will happen if the person divorces you, and what you will do if someone does this or that. And this is extremely controlling and coercive. Number 15 is punishment and withholding, where threats being made about what you will do. If you leave me, I will kill myself, or if you don't answer the phone, I will do this. Punishment is actually acting on those things, and very often what it looks like is either doing something, but more often it's actually about withholding. And what is being withheld is extremely common in relationships. We start withholding affection and communication. For example, giving someone a silent treatment is withholding and is a form of punishment. Telling you can't sleep in the same bed as me and have to sleep on the couch, that's a punishment. A punishment that clearly communicates, again, you are to blame, you are being punished, you did something to me. Number 16 is shouting and scare tactics. And I need to explain this. Raising one's voice happens in relationships. People get upset, they get angry, they raise their voices. I'm talking about when shouting or throwing something or slamming a door or breaking a dish becomes a pattern in the relationship, and it's a particularly powerful pattern, because for some people this is extremely distressing to experience either verbal violence or these sort of random acts that are quite disruptive and can make someone feel extremely unsafe in the relationship. Number 17 is the last one on this list, which is about physical violence. Physical violence, obviously there's the extreme, which is to do with just straightforward spousal abuse and assault and domestic violence. People hitting each other, people literally assaulting each other. On the softer side, or sort of less obvious side, is pushing and shoving. Now, when someone resorts to physical violence, there's, like with all of these destructive interactions, it means a lot of stuff has happened. But there's no point where I interact with you physically in a way that overpowers you and that injures you, that ever leads to a constructive conversation or a relationship. So these are the 17 destructive interactions, specifically being about engaging the other person. You can see all of these interactions, they're quite active. They do something. I'm making a threat, I'm punishing you, I'm shouting at you, I am telling you what you're thinking, I'm telling you why you did things. It's very much stepping into this space and actively engaging the other person. And as we talked about in part 1, all of these are extremely provocative and triggering for another person. It pushes someone from a place of having a conversation to having to now start to protect themselves and defend themselves. whether it's justification or whatever that is, we go to a place of defensiveness, which is a survival state, and we're no longer able to actually engage in a conversation. And even though underneath these destructive interactions, within a therapy context, we can unpack what the actual emotional drivers are. When you are in a relationship, you respond to these behaviors, and they are highly corrosive. There's never a justification for any of these behaviors.